Well, man, Andrew Underwood, welcome to the show, my friend. So glad to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. I'm excited to be here, man.
Man, so our listeners can get a little bit better of an idea of who you are. And why don't you just tell people who you are, introduce yourself to them.
Yeah, of course, my name is Andrew Underwood, and I'm originally from North Carolina. I was born and raised in the Greensboro area, and yeah, it's been kind of a wild and crazy life I've had over the past little while. Recently, just moved from California, where I was running an environmental education program for public schools and out in the Redwoods. This is pretty amazing. If you've ever been there. Um, yeah, I got really involved in youth work and youth programming and especially in the outdoors. Actually, my first job ever was a canoe and kayak instructor at a Boy Scout camp out in rural community of North Carolina. So it's just been a really big part of my life from the onset. And I think pretty much everything I've done since then has been in some way related to or connected to youth work and the outdoors. I've been highly involved in camp ministry for, I don't know, probably 12 or 13 years now. And yeah, I have a high value for those environments. And yeah, I was really involved in soccer growing up. That was a really big part of my life. And so even just sports, and I was able to do some sports ministry in Brazil and played with this missionary team from Chicago early on my college career. And so I don't know, I find these environments of like sport and the outdoors to be incredible platforms for ministry, and it's just pretty much all that I've dedicated my life to. So I mean, that's pretty much all that I'm about. I'm married and I have a child on the way, which is
Yeah, you
pretty
do.
exciting. I do in June. And we just moved to Johnson City from California, Johnson City, Tennessee. And yeah, we have been here a week. So yeah, that was a long drive, and we're excited to be here and excited for this kind of new chapter of our life with Nexus and Wilderness Ministry Institute. So
And yeah, and so yeah, for those of you that don't know, well, you should know because it's in the introduction to this podcast. But Andrew and I work together for the Wilderness Ministry Institute. Um, but before we talk about kind of your career and your jobs that you've had in leading wilderness adventure, and I want to take it back further than that. So you said you grew up in North Carolina, which is our neighbor here. Man, like, at what age did you start like really getting into being outdoors and being outside?
well, unfortunately, my childhood was not the best situation. Um, I had an abusive father and
Mm.
a really difficult situation there. And my mother like rushed my brother and I out of our childhood home in the middle of the night when I
Mm.
was young to go to my grandparents' house. I think the reason I bring that up is the fact that I don't know, as early as I can remember, find some sort of like escape or solace or something in the woods around my family's homes that I've lived in, and especially my grandparents' home when we lived there. This giant lot of woods behind their house, big creek there. And for whatever reason, I just fell in love with being out there. It was somewhat of an escape from the pain and suffering in my early childhood, and it just made a lot of sense to me. It was really peaceful, and to go play in the creek and to do all those things, like, I don't know. I actually remember this time my brother and I, um, we had actually like visiting my dad, and we had gone to the woods across the street from his house, and we had just gotten so lost in the adventure of being out there, and like we went deeper than we ever did before. We just lost track of time completely, and we come like skipping back up to the house who knows how long later, and there were cops at our house, and like they had called the police. They thought we were lost. It just like I don't know, from the earliest parts of my childhood, I just remember being so, I mean, I hate to use the word intoxicated, but I was just really drawn to that place of wilderness. It became quite the refuge for me. And for some reason, the beauty, the complexity, the peacefulness of it really spoke to me. And it was like the only world that really made sense to me as a young person. Um, and I think I just really hung on to that for the rest of my life. It just became a really important part of my life. And as I got older and understood science, and I mean, I just got so enthralled with the beauty of God's creation and the adventures that could be had out there. And I mean, the first time I ever went caving, I was just like felt like a kid in a candy store. Just like every little nook and cranny that I went around was just like the first person who ever discovered it before. You know, it's just like it really meant a lot to me, and it still does. And I feel like I still have that childhood like joy and love for those
Mhm.
places. And I'm pretty sure it had to have started when I was young. So
Man. So our listeners are hearing this story for the first time, and I'm actually we're experiencing this together. I didn't know that
mm-hmm.
that part of your history, man. So like, thank you for sharing that and kind of opening up. And as you were talking about like the woods kind of being this escape for you, and like it was like you felt like it was a place you could go for just like solitude and
Mm-hmm.
man, just being in God's creation, how just that sense of adventure just kind of drove you and kind of fueled you, even so to almost getting the police on a Amber Alert for you.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. Yeah.
so man, like with that, um, as you grew up and through your teenage years, so once you kind of graduated high school, man, how did that passion that you found during your childhood and that the wilderness being this place of solitude, man, how did you find that that kind of pushed you forward into to pursuing it for a job?
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, just, you know, the conversation around college and what you're going to do with your life is a big topic, right? And um, I just remember like really wrestling with the idea of what a lot of people were going to school for. It just seemed like they just kind of went down this list of all the things that made a lot of money and just picked one they think that they could just tolerate doing for the rest of their life. And I had a really hard time with that. I was like, you know, I just don't think I could live my life like that. And um, you know, soccer had some influence on my college decisions because I was kind of in that conversation space with a few colleges. And I mean, I felt like I was a good college. I mean, I was a good soccer player for a small rural community in the middle of North Carolina, but on the like, you know, grand world scheme, you know, it wasn't, you know, no one was like fighting over a roster spot for me or anything like that. But it was a big part of my life, and so that would influence me a little bit. But I remember visiting Appalachian State, which is just right over the mountains from here, and they had a degree in recreation management, and they had a focus that you could take in that degree in outdoor experiential education. And I was like, holy cow, I never knew that like you could do this for a living. And I didn't even know that you could dive into this deeper. And, um, you know, after being like involved in scouting and just my own like adventures in the world, I just thought, oh man, like I could really create these experiences and use these experiences to impact young people. And I was like, man, I think I really want to do that. And so I remember the first time I told my friends that, they all thought I was completely insane. They're like, you're never going to make any money doing that. And it's true, you don't, but you know, I didn't care. Um, I just didn't care. And I just remember like feeling so happy about that decision. Um, and I went through the program. There was at the time, I don't know kind of where it's at now, but it was probably one of the top 5 programs for experiential education in the
Wow.
country. And I mean, when you've got like one of your professors is a was a retired director of Outward Bound and
Wow.
all these things. It just felt like what a really cool school to come under and to really feel the depth of what, even on the clinical level, what experiential education does for human beings in general, but especially for the young person, and having the like lens of biblical teaching to like look at that through was really exciting for me. And yeah, I think it just kind of put me on this path of like accelerated, um, yeah, it really accelerated my career path in that, because you're kind of walking with, you know, a valuable degree in the industry.
Wow.
Um, and so I really focused my energy into camp world initially, but of course that branches out from there. So yeah.
Yeah. So you're talking about being able to be in an Appy state and kind of going through that experiential education program. But you were talking about having the lens of like biblical perspective to look through.
Mhm.
So this being a wilderness podcast, but also a podcast that we use to share our faith with people. Man, like when did you become a believer? And how did that again influence or give you the perspective when you were out into the wilderness of seeing God
Mm-hmm.
clearly?
Yeah, I think despite all my family complications as an early, you know, my early childhood, my grandparents and my mother were pretty adamant about us being involved in the church. And actually, my grandparents' home was um, just a little drive down the road from the church that I grew up going to. So we were there all the time. They kept me in that community and in the church. And I remember my mother being really like, um, really influential in my young life, of always talking about spiritual things and introducing me to the Lord. And I would say that I was pretty like emotionally caught up in church, but I was emotionally caught up in a lot of things.
Mm,
Um, so it was kind of one thing that was vying for my attention, and one place for me to kind of like exercise out or work out what it meant to be a human being. And
mm,
um, and I and I remember actually being at a camp in the mountains of Virginia. I was sitting around a campfire with our like little cabin group, and just remember like having um, you know, a few kind of young adult leaders there that explained the gospel to me in a way that I just didn't hadn't seen it that way
mm,
before. And I remember something just kind of clicked in my heart that this was a real thing. And it was not just transforming people's lives in this small rural community in North Carolina, but bigger than that. I think my world just sort of expanded, and like, wow, that God's real. He loves us, and he came to gave his life
mm,
for me, and restore a way back to what was intended in the
yeah,
beginning. And that
yeah,
really excited me. And of course, I was very trapped in a lot of things that young teenage boys are trapped into.
mm,
And my my college experience did not necessarily stop that.
mm,
But um, I think that that was kind of the beginning of something very special in my life that the Lord has been working out in my heart ever since. And that's really, I mean, to have something that special happen in that particular environment, I think says a lot to why I'm doing what I'm doing now. There was something
mm,
about that campfire experience, just being out there. My attention could have been nowhere else but that conversation. And I think it was particularly that space and that environment that created that opportunity for me to see and understand and hear the gospel message clearly. I
mm,
hadn't seen before or heard before and understood before in that way. And so yeah, and I think most of my spiritual formation since then not all of it, but majority of the most impactful moments have taken place in similar environments. So
Mm.
um, it's a pretty special thing to get to a place in your life where you can help do that for other people. So
Now, how old were you uh, when that
mm,
specific memory that you were just
yeah,
sharing?
that's
Yeah,
hard to
can
pinpoint, man. I can ballpark it somewhere
yeah.
in like my
So
like 10, 11,
yeah,
somewhere around
was
there.
this
Yeah.
before you experienced the uh, with your father leaving in the middle, or with you guys leaving in the middle of the night? Was it before or
That was
after that?
after
It was after that. Okay.
quite yeah, I mean, maybe like 3 or 4 years after that. I think
Wow.
we moved in with my grandparents when I was 6. So yeah,
Wow. Man, so you've got this period of time where you're just trying to comprehend things and trying to figure things out, and then man, just like being in that setting, being in that outdoor setting around the campfire, and man, just God speaking His truth to you. That is super cool. And then,
yeah,
again, that's
totally.
why I'm so passionate about that same setting, because man, one of the first things, like when you're looking in scripture, that I had experienced, but I really didn't know until I read that in Romans. Like Romans 1:19 talks about this. It says, "For since the beginning of time, God has been revealing Himself to us, namely His eternal power and
Right,
divine nature, through
right,
that which has been made, so that we wouldn't have an excuse." And
right,
man, I can think back to times like that where, like being outside and being in God's creation, not really like knowing God,
right,
but looking around and it just like inspiring me and really making me think. And I can look back now and through the lens of scripture and say that was God revealing Himself to me. And man, to think,
right,
to have that perspective that God would reveal Himself to us, just who are naturally, just kind of wicked in our hearts.
right.
It's such an amazing thing, and it's such an amazing revelation of His grace, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So man, moving forward, through that, you've been at Appy State, you've went through this experiential education program. You're really kind of honing in your skill set while your faith is growing at the same time. And so after you graduate, so what happens after you graduate? What do you do with this education that you've got? And how do you start giving that to bring value to others and to lead others to Christ?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it was really smooth and easy, and I just got like a slam dunk awesome job, and it was really happy and amazing from there. But it was in very like natural to life fashion, really bumpy and difficult and not straightforward. I did work at a camp actually here in East Tennessee. It's something that in college I started working here in the summertime, and it's actually the first um, introduction that I had to like Johnson City and this whole community here. Camp called Dover Gorge out in the Hampton, Elizabethton area, and I ended up moving to Johnson City actually my senior year in school. And because I can control my schedule, I just kind of like loaded my classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays and just kind of drove to Boone twice a week and just worked out at the camp for um, the rest of the time. Actually was also working for a youth mentorship program here in town at the same time because Dover wasn't really paying me anything. So yeah, so that was that continued after school. Um, the the mentorship program I was working at, I had lost a grant, so that was a bit tough for me to lose my job, and I ended up moving back to North Carolina for about a year and a half or so, and I was just like working construction, and I was just finding like every way possible to stay involved. And I actually ended up hearing about a project going on in Ecuador through a guy named Juan Carlos Ceballos, who Paul and I both work with now and know and love dearly. And he invited me down to Ecuador to help work on the project. And I just quit my job and basically just like sold a bunch of stuff and bought a plane ticket to Ecuador and like spent a month down there working with Marca just because I could. I had no like attachments to anything, and it was just like I could do that, and it was perfect, and I was able to do that. And I think that really started to snowball my ability to kind of like get out of this like sputtering mode and more into like, you know, more of a rhythm and a jog towards what I'm doing now, because it was more focused on other outdoor leaders in Latin America. We're kind of pulling together and working with them and training with them. And I think I caught this bug of a more transformational style of leadership than I'd been exposed to before. One that was really focused on like, instead of having people in your charge, more of a taking care of people that are in your charge and seeing them be lifted up and them be built up and them come with the school, you know, the tools and the ability to just outlive you and take your job away and not care about that at all. And I saw that in Wonka, and I saw what he was doing there. I was able to go back to North Carolina and raise some money to bring a bunch of these leaders. So we went back again, and I kind of did that type of thing for a while, just trying to get things going. I ended up having the ability to move to California to work in an environmental education program, and they were transitioning their leadership there, and I basically just needed to come for a year and kind of wait for this transition to happen so I can kind of step into the leadership of that program. And I did, and was able to kind of build that program up from about 7,000 students a year to about 13,000 students a year there. In the meantime, I actually was able to take a leave of absence and go work in China for about 3 months with a wilderness guiding company. We should take people out on the Tibetan Plateau for 14 days. And it was owned by a couple believers, and they hired local guides and used that platform of a business to transform people in their community for the gospel. And so I'm just able to like pick on all of these different avenues of being able to share the gospel through the outdoors, whether that be through a business or a camp or, you know, through an environmental education program that works with public schools, you know, so just kind of this really diverse environment, I think has kind of really rounded out my experience. Like you, Paul, I've got this like huge passion for rafting, and I was a raft guide in college for a little while, but I was able to pick that back up in California as well. There's it's about 2.5 hour drive from where I lived, but they had a offsite guide that you can kind of like on call sort of thing, or if they had a big weekend, they could just call me. And because of my semi-flexible weekend schedule, because I was running the program, I could like take the Saturday and just like go and guide on the river for a Saturday. My wife was just super gracious to let me do that often, and I made just enough money from that to like basically break even from driving, you know, over 5 hours to do that. But who cares, you know? It's just kind of keeping my skills fresh and just doing it just because I love it, and just getting to interact with people. And that company was also owned by believers, so getting to kind of like see how they worked with the public in that environment was really cool, and just doing things with excellence. And you know, you have lots of really amazing conversations with people on the river, and you know, as their guide, it's kind of fun to, you know, for them to kind of pick into your life and get to know you a little bit and get to kind of share your faith with them was really neat. And you know, I didn't think any raft guides were Christians, you know. You're just like, I thought you guys just like, you know, did drugs and like drank and like hang out, and I'm just like, you know, they're, you know, not all of us are like that. So so that was pretty cool to kind of get, and especially in California, people have a very particular, I don't want to pick on California, there's a lot of great amazing people out there, but they have a very particular like view of the world and what Christians are like. And so when they like, I was like, oh man, you actually like love creation and like take care of it, and like you're a cool raft guide, and like just like not fitting my mold to what Christians look like at all. So that's kind of a cool environment to walk into, and to be around other guides too, and just getting to minister to them. So I think like the Lord's really provided me with a lot of like really well-rounded experiences in my professional life, to get to a place now where I can influence all of those in some way or another with my new role. I think that's kind of like, I wouldn't be able to be in the role that I'm in now had I not had such a well-rounded professional career, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, man. One thing is you were talking there and talking about having all of these different opportunities to go and see how the different avenues of wilderness, how you can care for leaders and how you can invest in people and share your faith, and whether it's through the business or whatever that looked like. And one thing that you said that struck me was when you started seeing how you could, instead of just like developing this leader, actually like caring for them and getting them to this point where eventually they're gonna take your job, and like being okay with that.
Totally.
And being like a hero maker, right? And that's I think the thing that I love most about what God's given us the opportunity to do is that is exactly what we get to do. We get to go and pour our lives into these men and women that are leading young people, and sharing the gospel with them. So as that that big picture, is that vision kind of captured your heart and has brought you to this place that you are today, why don't you just share with our listeners kind of what your job is today, what your role is today with the Wilderness Ministry Institute and Nexus?
Yeah, I'm just now getting settled into this new role. It's been a little bit of a, I've been introduced to Nexus actually in this project down in Ecuador that I mentioned, which I guess is about 8-ish years ago or something like that. So I had a little bit of an understanding of what they did over those 8 years, and being involved with my friend Juan Carlos, who is now full-time staff with Nexus and WMI. But I've been spending the past year of my life support raising, and something I never thought I'd do. But you tell God that you won't do something, and then he laughs at you always when you say that, because
Totally true.
Don't do that, you guys. Not a good idea. But it's been pretty amazing. But just getting settled in the role. They've been wanting. When I say they, I mean Nexus has been wanting to have a full-time WMI director, and they've been wanting to have someone who is full-time dedicated to WMI. That's something that's kind of been, that role or that responsibility or that focus has been kind of like parceled out to a variety of different Nexus staff that have that skill set. But no one's been like, it's been their full attention, full focus since Nexus started. So I'm saying that to say that I am now working directly with the director, who they've now transitioned into having a new full-time WMI director, Joel Vermillion. And I am kind of Joel's partner in crime, and able to work with him directly in a full-time capacity, just focused on WMI. So what does that look like? Well, we've got a variety of different youth leaders and church leaders and community, people who are involved in their community in some sort of ministry aspect, whether that's like in a career or a volunteer, some sort of just influencer in the community that has a heart and a passion for utilizing wilderness in their ministry rhythms with young people and people in the church. And our heart is to come alongside of them and give them the tools and the skills and the vision to do it well and to be really effective in that. Sometimes leaders don't even know that that's even an option. They don't even know that that's a reality. It's something you can do with people. I just was able to go to Romania back in August, and we had a couple of leaders from Serbia and Romania. And one of the leaders in Serbia I mean, he's like, don't even care about the outdoors at all, and he realized how impactful it was for young people. And because he cares about influencing young people for the gospel, he wants to use the best tools. So, and he realized that utilizing the outdoors and the wilderness as a platform and a tool for sharing the gospel and spiritual formation for his youth. You know what he did? He went and learned how to be in the woods and in the mountains. And it's a struggle for him. He suffers the whole time, and but he does it. Why? Because he loves young people and he loves the Lord, and he knows how impactful it is for them. And so he's putting his life out there. He's stretching himself because he wants to be able to use this tool. And so we were able to come alongside of him and teach him how to do it and do it well. So we also are in a bit of a transition as an organization to developing more standardized curriculum and material, and I'm pretty excited to work alongside Joel with that. And as our organization grows and we add new people and being able to standardize that teaching and that curriculum and methodology like across the board. In a really small organization, like maybe you can get away with not having that as much, but as it grows, like you kind of have to flatten that out a little bit. And I'm very excited to be a part of that. And I'm very passionate about mentoring and discipling young leaders, and I get to do that as my job, and that is so amazing for me. And so, I mean, I've got a couple of people I'm discipling right now, and I'd just like to be able to call them up and talk to them and say, hey, instead of having to like fight for time to do that, as I have for the past 10 years, I get to do that as a part of my workday. And I love that so much. I am so thankful for that. And so that's a part of my role, and getting to invest in wilderness ministry and just our local church and young people here locally in Johnson City. I'll be doing that too. So I got a lot on my plate and excited to get rolling with it.
And one thing that you said is that this leader from Serbia who can't stand being in the wilderness, but because of their passion and because of their heart for young people and reaching them with the gospel, they were willing to put aside their comfort and go and learn this skill so that they could most effectively disciple and evangelize young people. Exactly. And I think so much of in this conversation that you and I had the other day at lunch, as we find ourselves in this very strange place on a global scale with the whole coronavirus and all these measures of social distancing that are in place, and what the effects that is having on our economies, and businesses are shutting down, and potentially even camps are shutting down. I know that our students, they go to a camp, huge camp over at Ridgecrest in North Carolina. You probably know where that's at. I just got an email the other day that said, hey, we are monitoring this closely, but I'll know that there's a very real chance. Sorry, my internet connection was being weird for a second. They said there's a very real chance that we may not be able to have camp this summer. And so how are we thinking about, leaders that take their kids to camp every summer? How are we thinking if that gets taken away from us, what do we do? And so what would you say to the leader that, and I think so many of the leaders that we find, and this may not just pertain to North America, but on a global scale, like you're talking about the leader in Serbia, is they don't have the skill set for wilderness. They might not even have a heart for it. But how would you encourage them to step out of that comfort zone to reach their young people?
Yeah, great question, great perspective, Paul. I think a lot of people think they need to have a huge shed full of gear, and I mean, I'm going to say training is of value. Yeah. You don't need to be taking kids out on whitewater rafting if you don't have the skills to do it. That makes a lot of sense. I think most people understand that. But I think I don't read the Message translation often, but when I do, I don't know why it just lands really well with me. And Romans 12, 11 through 13 of the Message says, "Don't burn out. Keep yourselves fueled in the flame. Be alert servants of the master, cheerfully expectant. Don't quit in hard times, but pray all the harder. Help needy Christians and be inventive in hospitality." And I
Mm,
love this because it's just like there's something to be said about just like in times like right now that are just like uncertain and difficult. And even when you are in a normal season of youth ministry or whatever, and you're just kind of at a loss of like how to take this deeper, or how to do this a little bit better, I think this has some wisdom for you, and that you need to keep yourself really, really healthy, spiritually fit and ready. You need to be alert and attentive to what's going on. And it's okay to be a little inventive with what's going on. Like, change this up. Everyone's figuring this out right now. I mean, it's so interesting to see how many churches are out there. They're just like finding the most creative ways to stay engaged with their people. And I think that puts a really big smile on God's face. I think he's
mm,
like, oh my gosh, like, look at you guys, like making the effort to stay involved. I mean, technology, we're so blessed by it. But when it comes to wilderness, like, of course, like it's hard to like be out in the woods on Skype, you gotta, there's something about being physically there that makes all the difference in the world. And you don't need any education, any gear to just go on a hike with a student. Like, honestly, like all my interviews that I ever did, pretty much with the exception of like remote interviews, I would go on a walk with them uh, in the redwoods. There's something really leveling about that, and really like, when you're sitting formally across from the desk of someone, you're not getting their real self.
yeah.
Okay. But there's something really like something that breaks down a lot of barriers, just to go on a hike with someone. And um, I got the most out of those experiences and those interviews I've ever gotten in my life, because there's something really beautiful and wonderful about it.
Mm,
I mean, take your students fishing. I mean, gosh, like that's not even that hard. You don't even need to be good at it, like just go. You can do it. It's easy. And with the social distancing thing, or just like not gathering in crowds, like this is better one on one. It enhances that. You don't, you don't need a fancy education and a shed full of gear to go do that. Like, you have the tools at your disposal. And something pretty interesting is the second most talked about living thing in the Bible is trees. That's no accident. We can talk a whole nother podcast about why that is, but go learn about trees. Go sit in the woods and do a whole year-long study on trees in the Bible, but go sit in the forest and do it.
mm,
Whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, it doesn't matter. Your kids are going to get a lot out of it. And I think you have the ability to just be creative, be inventive, and go get it, go have these experiences. Like, instead of meeting in your church every Wednesday night or whatever, find a place to have a campfire and go sit around that and do it. Like, change it up a little bit. In these times, you have the ability to do a lot of things. There's a lot of parks, there's a lot of places to go do things, and get kids out of their normal rhythms. And you'll be astounded, I think, at what comes out of those times. You'll be really shocked. And if you want to, if you don't believe me, try it. And then once you get addicted to trying it, call us, because we can help you take it deeper.
yeah.
And if you want to take kids out in the mountains for 4 days, we can help you do that. And yeah, you might need some skills to do that, and that's great. But you don't have to start there. You can start way simpler and way easier than that.
Yeah. One of the first times that I've been around WMI for probably 6 years now, and I went to one of the trainings that they had in Colorado, and I remember that one of the first things that I heard, because I was going out there thinking about like, okay, this is just nothing but wilderness training. This is going to help me to do all of this stuff in the wilderness. And they were like, in order to have a good, I forget, I think Ashley might have said it, but he said, if you want to have a good backcountry ministry. You need to have a thriving front country ministry.
Totally.
Because the time that we spend in the backcountry is very small in comparison to how we have to live our everyday lives with these students.
Yeah.
And having that relationship. So I think where I would come in and encourage is like, this is not something where, you have to go out every single day, every single weekend. Like there's a rhythm of that. And we see, and a lot of times when we're teaching these leaders, we say that we look at Jesus, right? Jesus had this very healthy rhythm of work where he was preaching, teaching, and healing in the cities. And then he would withdraw to a desolate place. I think it's in Mark 5 that says Jesus frequently withdrew to spend time in prayer, withdrew to a desolate place to spend time in prayer.
Yeah.
And so how are we doing that, man? And that's where I would just say, like, leaders, if you're listening to this, if you're a church leader, whether you're on staff or whether you're just a volunteer, listen to Andrew's words. Just try it. You don't have to have the gear, which I can say I'm guilty of that. I'm kind of a gearhead.
Totally.
I have to have all the cool stuff. It is fun.
Totally.
It is really fun.
Yeah.
But you don't have to have all of that to share the gospel with a young person while you're taking them on the wilderness adventure. And the reason that I love taking young people outside is because when you take God's word, we know that God's word does not leave his mouth and return void. It accomplishes the very task that he sends it out to accomplish. Mm-hmm. So we know that when we are reading God's word, and especially when we are immersed by his creation, where he's revealing himself to us, it has such a tangible and powerful effect on the person who is hearing that. Because they can take this biblical truth that they have learned and connect it to this real experience being in God's creation. And they will never forget. And I always tell the story, which I'm sure you've got tons of these stories. And you were saying earlier, it's like you have a lot of times where being outside and being in God's creation that stick out in your mind as these moments that shaped who you are and have shaped your faith. And that is why we are so passionate and adamant about encouraging you to take young people out, is because I love my pastor. Joel, if you're listening to this, know that. And any pastor that I've ever had before, know this, that I loved you guys. But I could not tell you of one single sermon that's ever changed my life in a deep way. But I can tell you of a whole lot of times where I've been out in God's creation and he has spoken to me, whether directly, whether he's revealed something to me through his Holy Spirit, or somebody that's been walking along with me under the influence of the Holy Spirit has spoken something to me, and it has absolutely changed my life. So that is why we do what we do. That is why we are encouraging you to get out and do this. Try it. And we are, part of what we do is, we are focused on engaging these leaders around the world. Around the world includes home as well. Exactly. So this is not just the job that we have. This is how God has called us to live our lives. Exactly. And so Andrew, if somebody's listening right now and they're just wondering, man, I'd like to get to know more about this guy. Like, how can they connect with you, whether it's social media or if they just have questions or anything, want to reach out to you more directly about the Wilderness Ministry Institute? How can they find you?
Wilderness Ministry Institute, as well as Nexus International, they have a great website. Go check it out. There's plenty of ways to reach out to us through there. I'm sure Paul can throw my email in the show notes or something. Feel free to reach out to me there. Really easy. I don't even care if you put my phone number on there. Just give me a call. But this might be dangerous. I'm not really sure if you should do that or not. But
we'll leave that out.
Yeah, I don't really care that much. My wife would probably disagree, but I probably should be a little bit more cautious about that. But I don't know. I'm just open, and so I'll just have him put my email in the show notes, and I'm sure he'll throw the website in the show notes as well or something, and you can go check it out there. If you reach out to WMI directly, they know how to get a hold of us. And
And I would say too, in this age of social media, you can, I think WMI, we have an Instagram, so you can go follow
Yeah, Facebook page.
Yep, Facebook page. It's at Wilderness Ministry, I believe, on Instagram. You'll have to look it up. I'm not so sure. And two, I know oftentimes, at least, and you've probably experienced this as well, Andrew, is when we're sharing what we do with people and people are hearing Nexus International and Wilderness Ministry Institute, they're like, well, what's kind of going on? Who do you work for? What do you do? So for those of you that are seeing this on YouTube, I use my hands a lot, but if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see this. So Nexus International is this umbrella that is the organization, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's different kind of legs under it. And one of those legs is the Wilderness Ministry Institute. So everybody at Nexus, we are focused on what Andrew was talking about, on caring for and equipping Indigenous leaders to take the gospel to young people through modeling the same method of ministry that Jesus did by focusing on a few to reach to many. That is what we do as a whole organization at Nexus. Now, there are a few of us that have a skill set that for being wilderness minded, and whether it's rafting or climbing, or we have these technical skills, and we, in addition to what we do at Nexus, just give that skill and give that tool and training to leaders to help them connect with young people, like Andrew was sharing about. So, man, thank you so much for being with us today, Andrew. I'm really excited just to continue working with you. And so many of our guests I don't get to talk to anymore, but you, I do. So I'm thankful for that. Do you have anything you want to share before you leave, or?
Not really. I think like this is just such a wonderful opportunity to just have a little bit of content, especially a lot of people are held up in their homes right now. And, you know, we want to be outside doing things. I'm going to go try to play some disc golf this afternoon with one of my mentors. But yeah, I just encourage you guys just to pray through this and really think it over deeply and know that you're not alone. You don't have to try to figure this out all by yourself. That's exactly why we're here. Our whole heart and our life is dedicated to helping people like you figure this out. And we don't have all the answers, but we are available. And I think that matters a lot. And we can be there for you in a minute. And yeah, don't be embarrassed to not know, or to be confused or lost or not know where to start. Those things are perfectly okay. And we want to be there to support you and help you. I think that would be the only thing that I'd say. And I just want to thank you, Paul, for having me on. I'm looking forward to being here in Johnson City with you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what God does in the future through Wilderness Ministry. So,
right on. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. And man, have fun playing disc golf today.
Yeah.
On this beautiful day before it starts raining again.
That's right. Exactly my point. Yeah.
All right. Well, man, have a great day. And yeah, talk to you soon, my friend.
See you, man.